Genesis for the New Space Age. Secret development of the round-wing plane, the extraterrestrials inside the Earth, and the arrival of the outer terrestrials. 1980. By John B. Leith. Genesis for the New Space Age. Contents Dedication Introduction Prologue. Part 1. Space Race. Chapter 1 Earth Under Surveillance Chapter I Early American Development of Prototype of Round-Wing Plane Chapter International Response to Unidentified Flying Objects Chapter IV U.S. Reddy's New Aerial Marvel for Possible German Conflict Chapter V Germans Acquire U.S. Round-Wing Plan Chapter VI U.S. Shares Secret of New Round-Wing Plan B with alias Chapter V Lead Development and Wartime Use of New Round-Wing Plane Chapter V Germans Abandon Fatherland in Giant Subs and Their Model of the Round-Wing Plane Chapter X Vanishing Germans Discover Mystery of Aga Chapter X BYRD Finds South Pole Entrance to Inner World Chapter Zibid Stalks the Missing Nazi Chapter XIIUS Peacefully Invades Inner World Chapter Teethbirds Aerial Disaster Sets Post-War Postures. Part 2. The Inner World of Extraterrestrials. Chapters Eveman from Atlantis. Chapter XVUS. Post-war military development of anti-gravity principle. Chapter X Vigimans build sovereign nation in Inner Earth. Chapter X Vierstrangers in Auskias. Chapter 18 A Day to Remember on Planet Earth. The first battle with a hostile alien craft from outer space. Chapter XIX A New Age Dawning. Epilogue Appendix Social, Political, Economic and Religious Life, Inner Earth Notes Diagrams, Photos and Documents. Introduction. Some of the most closely guarded secrets of this century, and perhaps since time began, will be discovered within the pages of this book. At the heart of the long-kept secrets is the phenomena, euphemistically known as unidentified flying objects, which certain nations of this world have developed with the aid of outer terrestrials from other planets. The manuscript is entirely original, from primary sources, most of which must remain anonymous. Over 100 interviews were conducted. Research for the project took 3 years of 2 men's time, plus thousands of hours contributed freely by others, some of whom placed their careers in jeopardy to do so. Material was gathered mostly in the USA, but also visited was the USSR, Mexico, Germany, Canada, France, England, Spain, Brazil and the Vatican. Washington was where the real struggle was fought to pry the truth from bureaucratic vaults. During the task of researching projects related to the UFOs, a few allies who wanted the entire story explained were gradually located in all walks of the capital's life. Some of those who came to our aid were senators, congressmen, top military men in all the services, and high-ranking civil servants, as well as agents and retired agents of the Central Intelligence Agency and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Through the efforts of all those sympathetic people, the book was completed. Its contents simply attempt to open up, without apology, the post-war history of the so-called UFO for examination. The USA, Canada, as well as Britain and Germany are the main custodians of the secret UFO knowledge revealed herein. But only in such a freedom-loving nation as the USA could there have surfaced bold men willing to defy tradition and disclose the buried facts about the new age of visiting spaceships, and inner and outer terrestrials. The manuscript did not begin on a theme redevelopment of the so-called UFO. It was started more as a doubtful question about the phenomena in general, and as ensuing facts were enlarged, the story of an international competition was recognized which had begun in the 1930s and which the authors labeled the space race. Quite soon, in the uncovering of additional information, it became apparent that Earth was no longer a singular planet on which men looked and listened for the reality of similar life elsewhere in the universe. Instead, it was evident that Earth itself was that sphere in this solar system which sister planets had been monitoring closely for years. We were not alone was the discovery which we the authors and countless others had made. But who would believe that report if we were to tell? This was the mind-boggling dilemma. Right from the start, it was anticipated that much of the new information sought on the space age could not be freed from security wraps for national defense reasons, which indeed proved to be so. Sympathetic to this corollary, the authors did not inquire at all into military secrets. but a recurring irritation was the unavailability of certain material of related UFO importance which will not be released for 50 years from its happening. That keeps many relevant events hidden till the 1990s or later. In this latter case, perhaps only history, or time, or unknown witnesses will come forward to expose the truth, but aside from the military considerations, this explosive knowledge had also been suppressed simply because of its phenomenal and disquieting aspects and the effect they would have in the public mind and spirit. Nevertheless, if the story of man's sudden immersion into the interplanetary world of extraterrestrials isn't unfolded in part, at least, its telling may come too late. For the inhabited solar system in which we dwell and the equally inhabited space beyond is far more complex than the average intelligent person will realize. It is in fact a universe of principalities and powers which have traditionally been visiting and perhaps seeding planet Earth for 1,000 millenniums and which probably will continue whether or not we accept their incredible reality. It is this knowledge that will confound most religionists and many scientists and educators in the next span of years more than any other current revelation about outer space. An eminent physicist of Stanford University has stated that committed Christians of all faiths will likely be the most unbelieving, as in Galileo's time. It may be that the greatest danger to the thoughtful reader will be his despondent reflection that God does not exist, or at least has become remote and impersonal. On the other hand, the revised rational air of the agnostic may be to elevate man into God's abode, raising man's ego image still higher. But what I rightly believe will become self-evident to thoughtful people when they know for certain that the horizons of the heavens are endless and that there is a force unlimited by time and space which must be omnipotent and omnipresent to fashion and turn the endless wheels of the cosmos, wherein earthman may be only an insignificant figure. For those who will think this material is science fiction in disguise, they are asked to delay judgment until the conclusion of the book. Meanwhile, a few of the problems encountered are shared with the reader. One foreign government complained to the U.S. State Department that their embassy staff were being badgered by the authors. In another country, the stay of the researcher was cut short when he was asked to leave. The Vatican registered a strong diplomatic protest with the President of the USA. The tone of its top emissaries was interrogated and forcibly searched while bringing material into the essay for the authors. A special hearing of congressional and Senate committees met in Washington to act on the refusal by a government agency to release unclassified information as required under the Freedom of Information Act. In another case, the researcher was taken into custody for attempting to photograph non-classified National Archives exhibits, and an executive order was secured to release him from detention. And just as offensive was a forceful reminder that the collecting of information and pictures from our former German enemies was treasonable under a still existing wartime statute. The drama of subterfuge on both sides went on, and in itself would comprise a book of skirmishes with the military and science worlds that would be both laughable and yet lamentable. But as the story of the round-wing plane unfolds, it will be realized how the authorities became committed to a band of silence going back 30 years. Nevertheless, the gathering of information for this book was not simply a game of the pen versus the sword. It was a rivalry of serious intent by the authors and those who came to their aid to persuade the government sources to reveal long overdue facts on the UFO enigma. And for those opposing forces who had been made keepers of the secret by the previous generation, it was a concerted attempt to dissuade the authors to go home and forget about UFOs and the nation's possible involvement. But curiously, the whole series of episodes has produced a grudging respect for the thrust of science in the free world and the hidden might of its military. Only in a democracy could the forces of constraint and openness meet in confrontation, and the lesser of the two protagonists be allowed to survive and tell of the struggle. As this century ends, a reluctant United States has been shoved onto the world stage at the most critical time of our civilization. Whether America likes this role or not, she and her friends are the star players who must take major parts in shaping this planet's destiny here and beyond. For far from being weaklings, the USA and her allies are the noble giants who hold aloft over our planet the shield that will keep our world intact and still free. Prologue. There are a dozen nations on planet Earth capable of making nuclear bombs. There is an estimated stockpile of at least 30,000 heavy nuclear bombs among major countries, and 3 new ones are being added per day. If only a fraction of this destructive force were delivered, it could kill nearly all life in the face of the Earth, contaminating the planet and its survivors for decades. The atmospheric and geological upheavals would so change the Earth as it is presently composed that the highly civilized Aries would disappear in the dust of war or beneath rising oceans. As man's technical ability has pyramided to overkill his fellow men and destroy their abodes, peace in the heart of mankind and nationhoods has become only a hollow phrase, or at best, a fleeting hope. Onto this mad planet has come a new phenomena, the unidentified flying objects, and with them theatre and extraterrestrials. 1. Chapter 1. Earth under surveillance. The sun was 2 o'clock high on June 24, 1947 over Mount Rainier in Washington state, USA. A commercial pilot flying northerly in a clear sky over the Cascade Mountains fixed his sight to the left where a flash had occurred at the 10,000-foot elevation of the towering mountain. As experienced, 50-year-old Kenneth Arnold scanned the reflection. Little did he think that his description of the objects seen near the burst of light would result in the coining of a new universal word. Here is how Arnold expressed himself that afternoon as reported later in newspapers around the world: "The 9 objects I saw flew like saucers, if you skipped them across the water." Although what Arnold saw was highly technical, he pictured it in a simple, idiomatic term which thereafter caught the imagination of kings and commoners across the globe. Thus was born the age of flying saucers in the 20th century. And no one, scientist or seer, could turn back the clock ticking toward the arrival of the new aerial age. Hundreds of thousands of similar sightings in the current years would leave the world divided about the controversy. Simply understood, the question raised would be, are the flying saucers real pieces of hardware or are they figments of imagination? Unknown to Arnold in the immediate post-war years, the unidentified flying objects he observed had been constructed and had taken off from the geographical area beneath which he flew. In his reflections, he would not surmise that he had just witnessed the evidence of an aeronautical secret which had been kept under official wraps for over 20 years. What the veteran pilot of fixed-wing aircraft had watched were his own countrymen piloting a revolutionary breakthrough in aerodynamics named round-wing aircraft. Today, the latest versions of those early round-wing planes which Kenneth Arnold glimpsed over the Cascade Mountains have escaped the bonds of Earth's gravity, and thus weightless, patrol the outer skies of this planet and venture fearlessly into the realms of vast space. At this juncture, before the wider explanation of the intriguing aerial phenomena is revealed, the average reader will recognize this unanswered riddle. Never has it been told to laymen the identities of the thousands of aerial sightings seen by professional airmen and ordinary spectators in the last half of this century. 2. To state the conundrum briefly, the so-called flying saucers seen by Arnold and countless others across the globe were called unidentified flying objects by the United States Air Force. The terminology became commonplace but deceptive. Hence, the shorter euphemism, UFOs, was used to describe such aerial sightings the world over. This being so, the reader will first become acquainted with 4 identifiable aerial happenings which have been declassified. They are all researched and documented cases from the years 1947, 1948 and 1955, and are actual crash landings and subsequent encounters with beings from other worlds. Following these reports, the story will be revealed of the round-wing plane as it was developed on planet Earth. And when the revelation is unfolded, quite imperceptibly, the following conclusion will dawn on most readers. The genesis of a new age has already begun for Earthlings. And it is self-evident, we are late in joining interplanetary creatures who have ventured into the vastness of the universe in search of other intelligent beings. Case number 1. Riddle of the crashed UFOs. One night in 1955, 3 manned spaceships from beyond Earth's own solar system crashed into the desert near Farmington, New Mexico. Their unscheduled landings shed a display of fireworks that was seen by hundreds of people for 20 miles. Yet, few Americans more than 22 years later have heard of that hushed-up accident, except those in classified military circles. The 3 intergalactic spaceships, with 28 beings aboard, brought to planet Earth its most revealing evidence that mankind was not alone in the universe and that Earth was under military surveillance by unfriendly invaders. This revelation also sobered Earth's scientific communities. Because, beyond a doubt, the alien craft were right out of a space odyssey of the future. For reader understanding of the alien spacecraft crashes, known as the Farmington Incident, it began about 450 miles from the crash late on the evening of January 17. At that time and place, a team of communication specialists, codenamed Bootstrap, were monitoring Army maneuvers with sophisticated long-range equipment. As the monitor spun the dial, he picked up traffic on a distant amateur band. What he heard was highly unusual ham talk. The ham's remarks were, in fact, an introduction to what was to become, in the next 48 hours, America's most dramatic attempt to apprehend live aliens from outer space. 3. A radio ham in a staccato voice had told his listener that a large bright object had streaked down from above and crashed in the desert near Farmington. As it struck Earth, it had skidded and bounced, making a path over a mile long. Rumbling, grating and tumbling along over the desert, it finally stopped. The ham then called it a whopper of an aeroplane or meteor crash, but ended his message by saying, oddly enough, that there had been no explosion. Then he signed off, advising he was heading for the site. So were dozens of others who had witnessed the unusual night display. 12 hours later, by direct order from off-air monitors from Operation Bootstrap, had become a communications and rescue team arriving in the vicinity of that night's drama. Traveling at these speeds and with top priority, they sped on, still monitoring police and amateur airwaves. Each band they tuned in convinced them the object of their all-night thrust was a downed military aircraft containing either classified equipment or high-ranking military or civilian passengers. En route as instructed, the team had acquired an extra communications truck, jeep and live ammunition. Then the unexpected happened again. Another ham, corroborated by a state trooper's radio, reported a second crash at 2 p.m. in the same vicinity. Move it faster, the commander urged his night convoy. It was 8:30 a.m. on the morning of the 18th when the team arrived on site. As Major Robert Farrell, not his real name, of St. Petersburg, Florida, endeavored to clear a path to Rex, another meteor-like blob zoomed out of the sky from directly above. There was silence as the thing slammed to Earth. The third object cut another desert swath of billowy sand and buried itself within a mile radius of the first 2 crash sites. Approaching the last crash, the security team almost immediately confirmed they were not at the scene of an accidental crash of a conventional aircraft. The silhouette of the disabled object also indicated that it was no rough meteorite. What they saw in the total scene were 3 strange, unidentified airships of similar design, somewhat saucer-shaped. As the Bootstrap crew mingled with the crowd to survey the scene, people began banging on the hulls with a variety of tools and rocks. One man was about to fire at the hull of one of the downed ships with a high-powered rifle when the 10-man rescue squad took positive action. Dissuaded by cocked rifles of the Bootstrap crew, the curious backed off. 4. But the Bootstrap major instinctively felt uneasy. He sensed there could be intelligent life inside. Powerful microphones were held against the skin, but no internal sounds or voices were picked up. Peering inside through a hole about 7 inches in diameter, the Air Force major glimpsed the craft's scorched interior and observed 2 badly burned bodies reclining on seats. Eventually, a 5 by 4 foot door, totally invisible from the outside, was located and opened. Venturing in, the major could see the ship's occupants had perished in a flash fire. Had the alien ship struck a magnetic vortex high above the Earth, or was it the victim of a high-altitude aerial encounter? First, the bodies were removed and placed in military bags. The charred bodies averaged 32 inches in size, with one giant corpse of almost 4 feet. Weight was estimated by the medical autopsy records as 65 to 75 pounds, with the giant weighing close to 100. See Appendix. The hands of each corpse were still gloved, but they had not been wearing their glass-like helmets at impact. Closer examination showed that a touch of a finger near the collar automatically unzipped a one-piece azure to reveal bodies with a skin pigment of golden tan. The hair on each was black, their eyes had no risers, and were occidental in appearance. Their feet were slender and unusually long, as were the toes. Hands and feet each had 5 appendages with nails. The sexual organs were pocketed in folds of skin when apparently not in use. Major Farrell had gained entry to the first ship by a fluke as his hand touched a door release while he felt around the inside of the window hole. Another fortunate blunder now took place. Totally on his own, one of the rescue crew began yanking aft controls on the ship's console. The Major spotted him and rushed to prevent further damage. The vandal accidentally fell against a hidden panel door which simply opened under the sudden impact from the man's weight. The 11-square door had been totally invisible, as were all seams on the outside and inside of the craft. Inside the hidden panel lay a crystalline, metallic ring about 18 inches in diameter and 3 inches thick. Overhead on the roof, the Major recalled having noticed an impression, barely visible, about the same size as the ring. When the ring was placed in the circular groove, it clung magnetically. The humans investigating the alien craft were hardly prepared for what happened next. As the ring was twisted counterclockwise, about 40 degrees from the set point, the magnetic adhesion which had held the ship intact was de-energized. Bedlam broke loose, both inside and out, as the ship began falling apart outwardly into 9 petal-like sections. The inside rescuers tumbled down among the separated sections as those outside leaped away. None was hurt except for bruises as the sections disjoined themselves and the interior console doors and all access panels opened, exposing their contents. Only the center housing, located in the bottom of the ship, remained intact. It was cylindrical, 3 feet in diameter and 3 feet high. This piece was slightly radioactive and was later ascertained to be the power source for the ship's anti-gravitational force field power system. The storage access areas contained extra flight gear, food wafers, spare parts, medical supplies and mapping tools unfamiliar to the rescue crew. That the alien ship was from beyond Earth's own solar system, the U.S. Air Force later concluded, and maps within showed its home planet could be in a remote part of the Milky Way or even from a constellation in another galaxy. But stellar coordinates of the home planet could not be ascertained. Its mission and that of its mothership was to map Earth and report this intelligence to their home base. Theman found charts showing the Earth's conformity with rivers, mountains and cities plainly visible. Square map sheets of a metallic substance showed Earth's charted grid lines running along magnetic variations. The results were unlike existing Earth chartographic methods which show position by longitude and latitude. This alien ship was measured at 27 feet in diameter and 9 feet thick. The underside was slightly concave with 3 round caster-type protrusions 120 degrees apart, which, when extended, became ship's gear. Ship design was shaped somewhat like a Coleman lantern except that the bottom skirt was flared outward. On the 3rd day after arrival, rescue operations were moved to a second ship. This craft was saucer-like 36 feet in diameter, and had the same 3 caster-type landing gears as on the first ship entered. The crew sandbagged the outside, applied and twisted the tool ring to the center top. Aganth craft parted in 9 equal sections with the center pin power source remaining upright on the bottom. Inside, 4 more burned bodies were found and the rescue crew again removed the bodies of human counterparts from another world. They placed the 4 dead aliens beside their 2 comrades from ship number 1. Various medical, technical and scientific experts were now on hand. The smaller ships and their contents, along with the bodies, were loaded gingerly by cranes aboard low-boy trucks for eventual air delivery to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Hangar No. 18, Dayton, Ohio. Air Research and Development Command, under the watchful eye of Air Technical Intelligence Command, would now take over their transportation and ultimate study. At Offutt and Wright-Patterson Air Force Bases, the nation's experts from all across the USA, in whatever field needed, were already being assembled, and sworn to secrecy. These experts would attempt to comprehend the significance of these visitors from outer space and compare America's progress with that on an alien society's space technology. 6. By now the team of expert personnel had grown to approximately 150. The largest craft, approximately 100 feet in diameter, was now approached. Unable to find an opening after digging it out, the magnetic ring again was found to be the tool for opening the ship. It was sprung apart as were the others. The center core of the anti-gravity propulsion device measured 9 feet in height by 9 feet in diameter. Its radioactivity, higher than the others, was less than the emissions from a hospital X-ray machine. Lead shields were used to cover the core. Inside, 22 burned bodies were found. The ship was functionally the same as the smaller ones but measured 99.9 feet in diameter. It was armed with deadly laser ray guns and had probably been shot out of the sky by another spacecraft with superior firepower, which had also dispatched the first two craft. Additionally, galleys, sleeping quarters and baths were revealed. Utility panel buttons numbering 81 in blocks of 9 were laid out, with 9 other functional discs, for use by pilots and navigators. These discs had slight indentations for fingertip control. Fingertips placed on various indenture combinations apparently gave swift commands to the different electrical systems. The Earth experts wondered how the aliens' fingers were maneuverable enough to operate the system until their hands were examined. The fingers pivoted forwards and backwards in a 180-degree arc. The entire crew had this physical anomaly. The scientists also confirmed that certain navigational equipment in the flight guidance system was tuned to register mind patterns or vice versa. Each alien had 4 lungs, enabling him in a given time to slowly compress and comfortably breathe the Earth's atmosphere. Their blood was a brownish color and thicker than ours. The autopsy showed they probably had been breathing within their life support system a mixture of air with less oxygen than Earth people breathe. The brown, central part of the eye was solid in color. Beneath the outer layers, the focus membranes were hidden. Apparently, the beings were able to look into the sun without eye injury or see into the darkness of space. The corpses were undressed and immersed in alcohol. The group was so nearly identical that they seemed to be genetically cloned. Unless they were seen walking our streets in a single group, their variances to humans would probably go undetected. Each appeared to be about 25 years of age as Earth time is measured. Concentrated food wafers were discovered. Each of these was about 1.5 inches long, the size of a single stick of dentine gum. One wafer found near a body was dropped accidentally into a tub of water and dissolved immediately. Its aroma was like that of vanilla extract. It bubbled and frothed over. 7. The rim of the bucket, finally rising into a deliciously tasting dough that would have filled a 30-gallon vat, the rescue team jokingly called the mixture desert manna. Later it was proven that one small food wafer kept a person alert and without the need of sleep for at least 3 days. Measurements of the big ship showed it to be 99.9 feet in diameter, with its outer rim forming a perfect circle. It was 27 feet through the true center of the dome and 18 feet at the center riser's edge. Color was a metallic gray with no visible markings, windows or openings. Within 2 weeks the operation was over. The remaining bodies were placed in glass cylinders and along with them their dismembered ship, covered with tarpaulins, were hauled out of the desert. Count Hippolyte assisted in directing traffic. By night, the ship and other remnants of the accident were shipped to Ockerland Air Force Base near Albuquerque, New Mexico. From there they were placed on board a huge 6-pusher type propeller aircraft known as a C-99. 3 trips were required to transport the material to Wright Air Force Base. In January, a report was made to assembled congressmen, senators and military in the Der Grand Command Center of Offutt Air Force Base. Viewers were shown the bodies, films, samples and other supporting graphs and data. Presentation on the findings were made by approximately 20 technical experts called in over a 5-hour period. Sobered by the first-hand account of so many reliable witnesses, was Captain James Ruppold, who headed up the official Project Blue Book on UFO sightings. By agreement of those present, and with approval of President Eisenhower, the lid of secrecy was screwed airtight on the Farmington incident. The official line on all encounters and sightings, Griefarter, beings from outer space, did not exist. Notwithstanding, secretive undertakings began thereafter to assess the outer space technology and scientific advances found on the ships and to compare them with U.S. Air Force accomplishments. A nation's strength or weakness ultimately lies with its people. The official attitude of air intelligence was that the American people could not comprehend that beings from light years away were spying on Earth for purposes unknown. As the official books were closed on the Farmington incident, Air Intelligence began rounding up film and tapes taken at the crash. Newspapers made brief mention of the story. Talkative people were, of course, and the Farmington affair was buried where it began, in New Mexico. Since 1955, the secret has seeped out into several related scientific, medical, and technical arias through writings, speakers, and references referring to the phenomena. Today it is estimated that at least 1,000 persons have knowledge of the crashes of the 3 alien spacecraft. 8. But only a handful of people, mostly U.S. Air Force personnel, knew what really happened high above America that day when 3 alien ships spying on planet Earth tumbled out of the sky with dead crews near Farmington, New Mexico. Case number 2. The Robot Earth Watchers. Hundreds of sightings were analyzed over a 3-year period in several countries, but there are no better cases than those contacts recorded in America between Homo sapiens and beings from beyond. Many helpful intelligence authorities believe a national awareness of alien presence must be expanded, and quickly too, they say, in order to prevent any mass fear or hysteria. Certain of the aliens who have already arrived among us want their presence known, too. They may be the vanguard of intelligent beings scattered throughout the cosmos whose plans call for opening up total communication with Earth before this century ends. Therefore, only a brief mention of the next 2 cases is essential to portray the reality of yet another kind of alien eyes used to watch Earth's military installations. It was in 1958 near the town of Oregon, near the Columbia River, that the episode took place. Thunknown occupants were captured and removed their craft down by a support firing unit for protection of the Air Force bases at Fairchild and Tacoma. Later the ship was transported to the headquarters of SAC at Offutt. Upon gaining entry, there was found not humans, or humanoids, but 4 robots at the controls. After failing to remove the heads using conventional methods, an attempt was made to carry one of the robots by lifting the feet and back of that head. On raising that head upwards, a corresponding movement occurred in one of the arms, revealing an unseen release mechanism in the back of that skull, which uncovered the robot's brains. Literally hundreds of light sensors composed the eyes of the robot, with signals from these sensors sent by instantaneous replay taped to the robot's computer located in its chest cavity. As the computer accepted the impulses from the light meter's eyes, it sent the response orders to the arms, legs, feet, and fingers or head, telling each or all members to take what action was necessary to properly operate or adjust ship controls. After the computer received the taped instructions, they were logged in a memory bank, the reel or tape continuing back to the light sensors and thence to the computer or brain for continuing instructions. 9. The robot's feet and hands had only 3 digits each. The robot craft was navigated by these analog units to map planet Earth and do surveillance. Of the 4 units found at the Oregon crash, only 1 was undamaged. 6 months after the Oregon recovery, the U.S. began making its first thermography pictures. Earth scientists are now convinced that the technology of one planet or solar system may differ vastly from that of another. Thus, a mothership situated high in the sky over Oregon on the day of the robot crash was used to initiate the master surveillance plan of Earth and record same from its drones located perhaps over various U.S. strategic military areas. An engineer rushed to the Oregon site for the record, concluded that the analog ship had struck an uncharted magnetic vortex at 15,000 miles per hour, but not everyone agreed. The crash landing of this alien ship from some unknown planet also was reported by the Air Force as a meteorite, although when tracked by radar it was seen to have made a 90-degree turn upon being pursued by another object before the subject craft lost power and tumbled to the ground. At least 10 alien ships have crashed in America since the first one was found. And aside from robots, perhaps as many as 40 bodies much like ours have been recovered and autopsied. Today reports want them are filed in the large library of information on the premises of the CIA in Arlington, Virginia. Case number 3. The Mantell Incident and the Live Aliens. In UFO annals, one of the most repeated stories is that of Captain Mantell, who was shot down by UFO over Godnam Field, Kentucky on January 7, 1948. The official version stops there except to add that his remains were recovered, followed by an appropriate military funeral which ended the episode. But the story of the 25-year-old World War II ace was far from finished by the recovery of his remains. At that point the real story begins. Just seconds prior to Mantell being shot down by the UFO, he had landed a lucky burst of machine gun fire into a vital section of the alien craft.
Simultaneously with Mantel's P-51 fighter plummeting to its hillside crash site, the UFO also fluttered toward within 3 miles of the military airfield over which it had been intercepted. The tower at Godman Field had reported initially an object which could not be identified on their radar. Meanwhile, flying a routine flight over the field was a group of Kentucky Air National Guard, of which 10. Captain Thomas J. Mantell, as flight leader, was requested to investigate and, if possible, challenge. On reaching the 8,000-foot level, Captain Mantell radioed to the tower that a bright circular object was hovering below him. He kept contact with the tower as the object moved 50 feet below his plane and began passing him. Next, the object hove silently alongside Mantell's starboard wing. Inside the 30-foot craft, Mantell saw 3 figures observing him through portholes. The scrutinizing UFO then rose to 30,000 feet with Captain Mantell unable to close the distance in pursuit. After chasing the UFO in a futile attempt to overtake it, Mantell reported an about turn by the UFO as it turned down on him at a fantastic speed in what seemed a suicide course. At the last moment, Mantell fired a burst at the object. It stopped abruptly in midair and a collision was barely avoided as UFO fell toward Earth. Hot in pursuit, Captain Mantell rolled and followed. The tower maintained radar contact and was able to observe the chase. As the UFO descended with the P-51 on its tail, those below saw a blinding flash, as though perhaps a burst of explosive light had struck the P-51. The aeroplane broke apart and crashed on the side of a mountain about 5 miles from Franklin, Kentucky. The day was cloudy with a slight haze as trucks on the field rolled out after ground crews witnessed the flash of light that had struck the P-51, after which it began to fall earthward in pieces. An Air Force captain and sergeant photographer rushed through the gates towards the falling UFO. As they sped toward sight, the photographer, using a zoom lens, also caught the tragic scene of the P-51 breaking apart within sight of the base. Meanwhile, the unidentified flying object skipped and tumbled slowly to Earth, glowing like a ball of fire. It was this bright glow emitted by the UFO that enabled the emergency recovery crew and the photographer to spot exactly the alien crash landing site. The foregoing is the story of the chase. Captain Mantell shot down the UFO. The UFO in turn destroyed him. Before either craft had crashed, the air base had hurriedly dispatched 2 emergency crews. One rushed to the P-51 wreckage and the other vehicle raced to the site of the unidentified flying object. The photographing team had orders to head for the UFO, but en route was able to photograph disintegrating P-51. Air Force intelligence reached Mantell's crash first. The plane had disintegrated into thousands of pieces. There was no fire and no odor of burnt flesh or fabric. They found Captain Mantell still in helmet, suit and boots. As they removed the clothing, the emergency crew recovered a clean skeleton, intact from head to foot. The remains were taken to an Air Force laboratory for identification and autopsy. The skeleton of the deceased Captain Mantell was later placed in a sealed container and taken to a nearby undertaker where it was put in a coffin and sealed. 11. The story at the UFO crash site had a different ending. As the photographer continued to shoot pictures off the crash, they saw the glow of the craft cease as they arrived. A door opened and slowly 3 beings emerged with hands in air. The color of their complexions was light tan. They were tall in stature with high and narrow foreheads. The airmen rushed towards the UFO, guns drawn, as one of the beings in perfect English said calmly, "We mean you no harm. We have come in peace." The photographer sergeant began snapping official pictures of the exterior and interior of the craft. These pictures were to remain hidden in a Washington vault for almost 30 years. The aliens were hustled back to the base as the confused gate guard was ordered to permit entry of the group without identification of the airmen or aliens. 3 days later, at the administration building, the aliens were still being interrogated by a battery of Air Force intelligence officers from the Pentagon. Their alien story: they came from Venus, the capital planet of this solar empire. They said other alien craft in the air at the time had crews from Pluto, Saturn, Mars, etc. Earth military installations were being scrutinized carefully, they said, with no hostile intentions except to record Earth progress for interplanetary travel and nuclear war, the Earth stigma that had alerted our sister planets to keep up constant surveillance. They said that upon being disabled by the P-51 they instituted no retaliatory action. Rather, their craft was programmed to beam in by radar fix on any adversary who shot first. The human-like beings repeated that they were sorry and had not intended to take the life of an Earthman. The Air Force was undecided just what to do with their unexpected visitors, who, in fact, had entered American airspace only to observe. As base radar scanned the sky, it tracked additional spaceships hovering high above. Therefore, it was deduced that to try the aliens for murder would bring reprisals from above. The 3 aliens were placed routinely in the guardhouse. It was while they were incarcerated that second night that the problem of earthly law and ethics was solved without earthly help. During the night, the military policeman in charge of detention left his guard duty and ran to the officer in charge. "They're gone," he shouted. "The prisoners are gone." Quick examination by security revealed the cell door was locked, the barred windows still intact, and no escape holes had been cut into the walls. Less than an hour later, the answer came. Without human action, a message began to appear on the station's telex. Simultaneously in the tower and communications room, the same message was audible. In effect, it said, 12. We are a companion craft of the one shot down. We regret having killed your airman. The act was not intentional. In future, please instruct your pilots not to fire on our ships to prevent further loss of human life. Our spacemen kept in your prison were just rescued by a means totally unknown to you. At another time, after friendship is established between us, we will tell you how the secret escape was made. We are in your space to observe. We mean you no harm. Again, please forgive us for the unavoidable killing of your pilot. We are truly sorry. At the time of the alien disappearance, some unusual and verified observations were made by several witnesses. Here is what is described as being seen. A 100-foot unidentified craft dropped down from above and hovered over the guardhouse. From the craft there emerged a beam of white light with a greenish tinge. On, or within this beam of light, the 3 aliens ascended or were taken up through the ceiling by unknown means to the presiding ship above the guardhouse. A non-Earthling who has been seen in Washington for several years and has been a confidant of Presidents described the escape ray. He said it was a solid beam that disintegrated objects in its path by disassembling the atom structure, while the ray shone and allowed reassembling of the atom particles when the ray was turned off. The Washington spaceman, whose name is Plato, explained that ray principle had been used in Venus long before the present Earth civilization began, which he declared was 33,000 years ago. Plato said the ray was also developed on Earth's sunken continent of Atlantis, but that its principle was lost when the continent sank 12,000 years ago. As ethereal as the beings appeared to be at the time of their escape, they bore unmistakable human characteristics. Body shape was human, features occidental, hair blonde, fingers long and slender, height 5-6 inches to 5 feet 10 inches, appearance youthful. Habits: while in detention, they took water into which they dropped or white pills at different times. They used the toilet facilities, and the official reports say they passed nutrients and urinated as do human males. No wonder. They insisted they came from the ancestral planet of Earth's white races. So ends the Mantell incident, except for over 2,000 pieces of official correspondence between the base, the Pentagon, and other agencies at Maxwell Air Force Base and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where the Venusian ship finally ended. After the Mantell incident, Air Force intelligence privately wondered why, if the aliens were able to retrieve their people, why hadn't they retrieved their ship? But publicly, the Air Force gave out this version of the Mantell incident. 1. Mantell lost consciousness due to oxygen starvation. 2. The object which Mantell was chasing may have been a Skyhook Navy balloon which had been released in the area. Case number 4. 13. United States receives visit from beyond Earth. Washington, February 18, 1975, time 10 p.m. A hovering squadron of high-altitude lights had just placed America's capital under a blanket of surveillance. Before departing, they would send shivers through the security surrounding U.S. President Gerald Ford, and their mission would also change the USA's scientific thrust in outer space within 60 days. On this winter's night in question, the sky over Washington was clear and visibility was excellent. High above at 50,000 feet, 12 unidentified and stationary lights had appeared. The lights were not celestial bodies, mirages, or balloons, nor were they conventional aircraft. They were, in fact, UFOs, a name first applied in 1966 by the U.S. Air Force to describe growing numbers of unidentified flying objects sighted around the globe. At the three major airports around Washington, several monitor systems handle traffic and also act as an early warning vigilance for unidentified aircraft. There is the AACS, i.e., Aircraft and Airways Communication System, the sophisticated radar at Andrews Air Force Base, and the GPR, ground position radar, etc. Therefore, besides untrained street personnel who spotted the mysterious lights, there were also the competent operators of the AACS, Andrews Air Force Base radar, and GPR, who were continuously watching the activities of the unidentified flying objects. At 10:16, one of the lights detached itself from the formation and, peeling off to the right, dropped toward the city. Its color changed from blue to white. In a park in Georgetown, the northwest section off the Capitol, the light landed, and as it went out there appeared in its place a solid object. Standing where the light had been was a 30-foot, saucer-like object with dome, supported by tripod legs. Underneath the craft a door opened from which a stairs extended to the ground, and an ordinary-looking being with Occidental features descended. The 6-foot-tall man moved briskly away from the perimeter of the craft and evaporated before his viewers. As he did so, curious onlookers who had seen the craft's landing in their neighborhood ran toward the machine. But 10 feet away from the craft an invisible force field kept the sightseers away. The hatch closed, and the machine stood isolated and alone. About 10:20, after the being had departed from the craft, there simultaneously appeared a stranger before the security guard at the street entrance to the White House. In perfect English he asked to see President Ford. The being's request was refused. At approximately 10:21, a being in a flight suit was seen walking down the hallway to the Oval Room. A Secret Service man challenged the figure from behind. It continued on. A bullet from the gun of the President's guard apparently passed through the being without drawing blood. 14. At the next instant, the stranger disappeared from the view of the Secret Service pursuer and silently passed through the locked and closed door to the Oval Room. Thereupon it stopped in front of President Ford working alone at his desk. The startled president looked up at the figure of a tall, slim man with black hair, dressed in what appeared to be a trim flight suit of silver-colored jacket and pants tucked into calf-length boots. The being spoke calmly. President Ford, I am sorry to intrude in such an unearthly way, but I have a message of great importance which must be told. He continued, I am a scientist from Earth's sister planet Venus, which, regardless of Earth's scientific postulations, is inhabited by a people identical to those like yourself on Earth. But my mission in being here tonight concerns special knowledge which others in this solar system have elected to give the United States as our chosen custodian for planet Earth. Much of the aliens' conversation remains classified, but some of the subject matter has been verified from executive sources. In general, the visitor spoke of the dawning of a new age for Earth in science, medicine, and other wonders, but hinged his remarks with a single admonition: Earth must first denounce nuclear war. The verdict of the outer terrestrial stemmed from an inerrant moral law of the universe, which Earth nations had broken by splitting the atom to destroy their fellow men. Almost an hour later the outer terrestrial departed. Upon leaving, he placed on the president's desk a dull, silvery object of elliptical shape with rounded edges. The stranger called it a Venusian book, a gift from his planet to America. Simultaneously, several miles away, the being re-entered the vehicle in which he came. It took off and joined the lights above, at which time the formation disappeared off the radar screens of the nation's capital. This meeting between an outer terrestrial being and a world leader is only one of the hundreds recorded since Earth's first nuclear explosion took place in 1945. American presidents alone have had a minimum of 60 visits. Earth has been watched by outsiders for at least 45 millenniums, and throughout the pre-Adamite civilizations. According to their spokesman, they have witnessed this latest civilization's advent of the railroad, the discovery of electricity, the aeroplane and auto, the rocket, the smashing of the atom, and lately, the fearful number of nuclear test explosions. And finally, the uncontrolled aggressions of nations to make their own atomic bombs, with intentions to deploy them. As the president picked up the object, and examined it that night of February 18, 1975, he called for Secret Service personnel. He also asked for the Secretary of State and scheduled a meeting of the General Staff to be held at the Pentagon as soon as possible to evaluate the disk. 15. During the presidential dialogue with the extraterrestrial being, he had declared the U.S. Air Force should learn the formula encased in the disk. Mr. Ford had gingerly examined the object but laid it down, perplexed as to why the alien should leave such an indecipherable thing as a parting gesture. Was it really a goodwill gift of science from another world, or was it some diabolical, destructive force that might enslave onlookers or destroy a city? Like his predecessors going back to Franklin D. Roosevelt, President Ford must have asked himself some startling questions about this peaceful outer terrestrial invasion, whose spokesmen looked human and acted like friends, notwithstanding their arrivals were always without warning or prior signal. And, in a broader sense, U.S. officialdom was also asking, why all the sudden attention which Earth was now receiving after years of comparative isolation? Even more perplexing questions were being asked by the suspicious military and science worlds. If these outer terrestrials were so advanced scientifically and metaphysically, what did they know about the future destiny of mankind that made them suddenly want to share their knowledge with a single nation, the USA? Aside from these basic quandaries, other sobering judgments had already been established, which authorities had long hesitated to pass on, and for an understandable reason. Those claiming to come from our solar system and even beyond were often nearly identical to certain Earth races in appearance and in biological, functional and mental ways. Obviously, there existed a correlation between Earth beings and inhabitants from certain other planets. As President Ford may have pondered these revelations that historic night, he was well aware that alien ships of countless origins were now bridging the time and distance barrier between various planets in the universe, the knowledge of which leading nations of the world had denied the public. Furthermore, appraisal of the combined worldwide UFO phenomena by military consultants was singularly conclusive. They concluded that all of planet Earth was under systematic surveillance by three distinct classifications of alien intruders. Those were labeled 1. Friendly, 2. Presumed hostile and 3. Unknown. Category 1. Friendly were usually round-wing in shape, originating within our solar system, whose human occupants have openly made themselves known to certain Earth governments in their letters from time to time, such as the foregoing visit to President Ford. The same outer terrestrials had also occasionally appeared by accident, for example the Captain Mantell incident over Godman Field, Kentucky in 1948. Category 2. Presumed hostile. These aliens generally came in round-wing planes and were of human resemblance from diminutive sizes to over 6 feet in height. They had, on occasion, attempted to 16. Infiltrate Earth by establishing hidden bases in remote areas, and their spacecraft were also engaged in mapping Earth and other questionable activities. It is believed they originated from one planet or constellation. Example, the Farmington Affair of 1955. Category 3. Unknowns. Chapter 19. Strangers in our skies, who were patrolling Earth's skies and watching our people in military installations increasingly in the late 1970s. They arrived in spacecraft of various dimensions and shapes up to 1,000 feet long. Occupants were observed to be of a variety of physiological descriptions, some of which, by Earth's standards, bordered on the ridiculous or grotesque according to their own admissions, which are delivered telepathically to Air Force pilots and airport controllers, etc. Observations of their spacecraft by competent observers suggested that their space technology may be more advanced than that of this solar system. But one repetitious warning had been delivered by all the friendly outer terrestrials with whom physical and voice contact had been made. According to informed Air Force sources, that constant warning stated a nuclear holocaust on Earth was possible within a generation unless immediate plans were made to prevent it. As President Ford may have reflected on the promise of sudden increased knowledge for this world in exchange for abandoning the international nuclear race, 2,700 scientists, engineers, physicists, astronomers, geophysicists, mathematicians, geologists and radio engineers were occupied 24 hours a day at the Goddard Center in Maryland, keeping watch on a more disturbing phenomena. A magnetically weak but inhabited alien planet, over twice the size of Earth, had wandered into our solar system and attached itself to the force field between the Sun and Earth. By the year 2000, this incoming intruder could possibly regress the climate where a third of the world's people are located towards another ice age. Its effects were particularly being felt in the northern latitudes where teams of American, Canadian, Japanese and Russian meteorologists and weathermen daily gathered the evidence of an abrupt change in world weather patterns. But, underlying these hidden discoveries and new knowledge of outer space, the real question being asked by the world's leaders was how to tell the public without creating panic. Collective scientific minds working on the secret already were aware of these explosive truths and the problems they presented. But how much of the biased viewpoints of our history, religion, philosophy, and science would have to be discarded in order to make way for the new 20th century revelations? These revelations clearly indicate Earthlings are not isolated, but in fact are part of an interplanetary league of intelligent creatures. Our counterparts from planets nearby and other destinations light years away are trying to give warring Earth nations a message. The aliens are telling us to stop the nuclear race and destroy our stockpiles before we destroy our planet and its civilizations. In return for heeding this advice, they would provide Earthmen with the advanced technological, scientific, and medical secrets of the universe.